in talking about Book 3 of the Môrdreigiau Chronicles, which is entitled A Sword for Wellington, I thought I would talk about my editing process and give a little value-added information there. Hi, my name's Shawler. I'm an artist, a writer, and the author of the Môrdreigiau Chronicles, a free serial to read over on Substack about a Regency-era woman in search of Arthurian artifacts in order to prevent a global climate catastrophe. And there are sea dragons. I always forget the sea dragons. Anyway. So first, I thought I'd give you an overview of the history of A Sword for Wellington, and then we'll get into my editing process. So A Sword for Wellington began its life as a Golden Heart finalist. Well, actually, no, it's kind of where it ended its life. Let me start again. A Sword for Wellington was one of the last manuscripts I worked on while I was still a pre-published author, and it ended up being a Golden Heart finalist at the Romance Writers of America awards, and I think that was in 2006, 4, 5, in there somewhere. You'd think I'd actually know that, and it was the story of a Dark Ages woman who's also a fighter, a warrior, swordswoman, who comes forward in time with King Arthur's sword to give it to the present-day incarnation of King Arthur. And present day, I mean, she went forward to 1814, 1815, to give it to the Duke of Wellington, who needed it before the Battle of Waterloo, as we all know. And the genesis of the story is so long ago, I don't exactly remember how it came about, but I do recall wanting to do a time travel forward instead of back and into the Regency period, because that was the period that I was focusing all my writing on at the time. It was a Golden Heart finalist. It didn't win. It didn't get picked up. And looking back at the original manuscript, it was not that original in the end, I felt. Although perhaps I'm a little too critical of my own work. And so it's been reworked a few times. I brought it back out for when I was still working with Kensington as a possible addition to my pseudonym work. And then, it just sat in a box. Now, it sat in a box, quite literally. And then I transferred it into this purple box that I have, and brought it overseas with me back to Australia, because I was living in the States, and then I moved to Australia. I found I couldn't jettison all my writing stuff. Like, I threw out all my old drafts of previous work, like my published work that I had kept, because at some point I had read somewhere you keep your old work and then someone will want to study it in the future. But I'm so barely mid-list, why would anyone want to do that? But I brought this box over, and I had this manuscript in digital format. My pages that wouldn't open it anymore, so I had to bring in another third-party software thing to open the old format and save it as a new format, and ended up copying it over into Scrivener and working on it that way. This was a story I couldn't let go of. There's another couple of stories in there that I couldn't let go of either. We'll see if we get to those. I have high hopes for one. Oh, we have crows in the neighborhood now. I have high hopes for one, but not so high hopes for the other one. So it was this whole going to the Congress of Vienna, trying to get this sword to Wellington, being thwarted by our hero of the story, who was an aide for the Duke, and has his own baggage, still has his own baggage, and an external conflict in that somebody else wanted to get the sword for Napoleon, not Wellington. And so with this manuscript, I thought it would be great to work it into the Môrdreigiau Chronicles series, because again, couldn't give this story up. And I worked it in by jettisoning everything about the Congress of Vienna. It did go on a bit, and it was the most derivative, I said the word derivative, of the whole sections. And I had to merge in Idathea's story as well. And so the beginning of this manuscript is a back and forth between the original manuscript, updated so I can compress the timeline, make things a little more urgent, and also Idathea's story. So it flips back and forth, and then it finally merges together into one. Now you can imagine that at some point this was easy, like in the beginning, because I could write the two threads separately. But then when they started merging together, whose point of view do I use, and so on. So the conceit is that it's Idathea's diary again, and I think I have a page torn out of Interviews with the Prophet, which was used in book 2, and a Victorian novel, a love story between the hero and heroine of A Sword for Wellington. And all that had to be merged together, figuring out points of view, and then making it consistent. Now, the way I do editing might not be the way that you do editing or the way that you can edit successfully. Everyone has a slightly different way of doing this, and you've got to honor your process and your way of being able to change and make the story a better story. If anyone tells you it's the way and it's the only way, they're lying. So with that said, so here's how I do it. Because I'm writing it as a serial, not as a novel, every chapter has to end on a bit of a cliffhanger, and it has to fall in with a certain number of words. And I'm around 2,500 or less, somewhere between 1,900 and 2,500 words, which is a kind of a big gap. But sometimes the cliffhanger fell a little early, and I wasn't going to do any padding because this has ended up being 40 chapters already. So that's almost a year of serializing, so I do it once a week. And while finishing a chapter on a cliffhanger is probably not necessary, if you do want to keep those pages turning, do that. Or be like Terry Pratchett and not have any chapters at all, and then you don't realize that until you're halfway through the book, where you've promised yourself, oh, I'll just read to the next chapter, and then the next chapter never comes. That's another way to keep your readers reading. But anyway, back to my edits. So these days, I printed out. This almost all of A Sword for Wellington, and there might be a bit of obsidian and flame in there too, actually, to be honest. I printed out. I did at one point just export it as a PDF and put it on my iPad to read, and then the PDF got corrupted and I lost half the edits. That happened with book 2. So I'm halfway through making all the edits in the book, and the PDF is corrupted, will not open, cannot be saved. I tried absolutely everything, trust me. Googled, Reddit, Apple support. If it's gone, it's gone. Apparently, if you make enough changes to a PDF in Books, the Books app, it just dies. And I did actually make that mistake a second time, and with obsidian and flame, no less. But fortunately, I only lost a chapter and a half of edits for that. Thank goodness. For some reason, it didn't save everything, and I had to... The obsidian flame is much shorter, so I could get it done quicker, I thought, and there wouldn't be as many edits. So I ended up losing a chapter and a half somewhere in the middle, which was a bit annoying because I realized that they disappeared, and then they reappeared again further down the page. I'm rambling now. Now I printed out. It is double-sided, 2 pages on a side. There's not enough margin space to be scribbling on, but still, yet I managed to scroll stuff that is incomprehensible. So my editing process, back when I was published, I had a copy editor who would go through everything and catch a whole bunch of stuff, and that was great. But I've never actually ever farmed my work out to beta readers. I have had critiques done of my work, but it's usually just the first 3 chapters to see if it had legs. So now I do it all myself. Now the magpies are going, and the magpie larks, and I can still hear the crow. And I close the door. So because once as a published author I was on a deadline, I needed to get a lot of edits done in a short amount of time. So what I ended up doing was just taking the manuscript and marking up everything. Editing me coming in here, I just realized as I was watching through this, what I didn't say, I don't think, was that what I do is I mark up all the edits first. I don't make any changes unless they happen to pop into my head quick and easy. And then I go through the entire manuscript page by page, and I make each change as I come across them, no matter if they're a small one or a big one. And that way I can call a chapter finished. And I color code my edits. I have one of those multi-pens. Purple is quick and easy edits. Like the typos, like rearranging sentences, because I use like the as phrasing something as something. And it's usually much better just to write something than something. If I come up with like a chapter title idea, I'll write those down as well. I have green for edits that are a little more trickier. Usually this is where I've written more in the manuscript, because when I do that first draft, I will write stuff down and I'm like, want to keep the flow going. I don't want to stop and analyze what a character's thinking or feeling. Like, I know it, but I can't like get it out onto the page. So I'll write more, and I leave that for future me to figure out, and future me usually hates past me for doing that, but I do it anyway. Blue is to check for like research notes, like is this a word that someone would have used in the Regency period? Do I have the dates right? Do I have the location of like, because each of the chosen court have like a mark on their body that shows that they were marked for the chosen court. Is it on the right body part? We have wounded characters, which like, is it that is hurt? That kind of thing, that kind of continuity, and also further research. I had to do a whole afternoon of how do people take care of blisters in the early 19th century. Pink I used for checking off, and then for bigger continuity questions, like if I felt there was a story thread that I had dropped and that needed to be resolved, that usually got marked in the manuscript about where I noticed it. And then on the front page, I would write down these big questions. Now, I can't show you pictures of that because that would spoil A Sword for Wellington for you. So that's how I put down that first round of edits. And it gets all marked up, becomes quite illegible. Then I go back to the computer with Scrivener, and I have a little stand, and I go through and I write, make all the changes as I come to them through the manuscript, so I can do a whole chapter and call it a revised chapter and move on. And after I have done all of those, then I go back to the pink story questions. Now, you'd think I did the pink story questions first, but sometimes I find I'm not always quite right about what I'm worrying or wondering about. And some of those pink questions will actually have resolved themselves, or I'm holding them in the back of my mind. For example, and I will explain this one, the heroine's name from the original manuscript is Gwen. We'll say it's Gwen, but her original name is Gwen DDYDD, which is Gwendeth, or Gwenthyth. Gwyneth would be the closest way to be saying that, honestly. It was something I struggled with when I was writing the manuscripts, like, no one can say this name. It's fine. If you don't know how to pronounce it, just think Gwen in your head, or Gwyneth in your head, or Gwendid in your head. Some variation of that. I'm not Welsh. My Welsh pronunciation is shocking. But when it's in her point of view, and this is written in third person, she uses her Welsh name. There is an older female character in there who refers to her as Gwyneth or Miss Gwyneth to follow the appropriate naming conventions of the Regency period. Idathea knows her as Miss Jones. So when we're in Idathea's point of view, she's always referred to in the manuscript as Miss Jones. Lear knows her as her Welsh name. And then the hero of the original manuscript, the aide to the Duke of Wellington, calls her Gwen, and then later his Gwen. So there are all these different names that needed to be consistent across the whole manuscript. So I actually started working on that while I was doing the edits, and then once I had done all the edits, I went through the manuscript again, searching for Gwen, her name, and continuing to make any changes that I'd missed. By the way, that's Idathea's house back there, for what it's worth. And then I always forget, and I forgot this in book 2 as well, that my Môrdreigiau characters, some of them, wear a torque around their neck. So it's sitting quite, which is quite unusual for the Regency period, and they shouldn't be wandering about the Regency period wearing them when they're above sea. So I've had to make sure that that was taken care of. I lost a track of one of the Arthurian artifacts for a bit. Oops. And, that kind of thing. So those are the continuity things. And then when that's all done, which is where I'm at now at time of filming, I let it sit for at least a week. And then I go back and do one more read through. And this one more read through is basically, did I catch everything? Is there anything that's still sticking out like a sore thumb that needs a little bit of tweaking? Anything that is unclear? I've gotten pretty good at realizing that I move on sometimes too quickly in my writing, but I catch that on a cold read. So that's why I give myself at least a week to wait. So what have I been doing while I've been waiting? I have been reading a research book, messing about with stationery supplies. What else have I been doing? Today I'm going to head back there. I have a work table sit back there. We're going to work on painting some furniture for Idathea's house because she's almost done. And I'll be doing a video of that at some point. a little tour of the Idathea's house that I have put together there. Still have to do some work on the exterior. I'm getting off the point. So I'm at the point at the minute where I'm letting the manuscript rest, and that's usually bubbling up some things that I realize I haven't addressed, and one of them was there's a character that gets pregnant in book 2, and at the end of book 3 they're still pregnant. So I had to write an additional scene this past weekend to resolve that pregnancy. Yeah. So this is why you let books rest and not get them out straight away. You come up with things that you thought you had taken care of, but you hadn't. I just thought I would throw this in. That sometimes it is actually quite good to just let that book just sit for a little while. So I'm ending up waiting 2 weeks before I go back and do a final read and a polish. And yeah, so hopefully it won't be too major. Okay, so back to past me talking about whatever she's talking about. So we do those final edits. It's already broken up into chapters, into Scrivener. I go through and then I do previously on. So if you come into the chapter, you don't remember what happened last week, or maybe it's been a couple of weeks since you've picked up and you're trying to catch up, that is a little bit of a refresher. In addition to doing those previously ons, I need to come up with headings, titles for each of my chapters, because chapter 35 is a pretty boring hook when you're doing serialization. So I want to make an interesting enough heading for those. And then, of course, I have to make the thumbnails for all of those for Substack as well, so it looks pretty. I need to finalize the book trailer this week. I think I've started it. I did it a long time ago. I just need to go through and fine-tune it because I only just fine-tuned the blurb as well this week. I need to get myself ready to make the book as well because we make the props, because I find them in the trunk in the attic. You know the story. The final edit, at that point I will go and print out stuff that needs to be printed out and put into book form and bind it into a book and all the rest. And then when I come back to actually schedule each post for Substack, it gets one more proofread. I always find stuff. Always. At this point, it'd probably be good to have a proofreader to do this for me, but I'm doing this for free. It's not like I have money to throw around. At least I'd rather throw it around on stationery supplies. And then I will schedule it to post. I usually do like a month worth of posts at a time. And then Substack will only let me do up to 3 months anyway. And then someone will find a typo after I've posted it and I'll fix it in post. When I fix something in the Substack editor, I also fix it in Scrivener because there is this vague possibility that I'll make a PDF available for people to read. Maybe, who knows? But it's always good to have the most up-to-date copy. And I do back that up to the cloud, as well as onto my hard drive, and yeah. So that is my editing process. Book 3, Sword for Wellington, as you know, is well deep into this. I am filming this a few weeks in advance. I'm hoping to get book 3 out mid-June or possibly beginning of July, because I do want to run the first 6 parts of Obsidian and Flame before I get back to A Sword for Wellington. Although, really, I could just switch over whenever I'm ready, and Obsidian and Flame will continue to run, but on a different day. I'll put it on Wednesdays instead of Saturdays. I hope you found this video interesting. If there are any questions about my editing process or A Sword for Wellington, I don't have a trailer to show you yet, but if I do, I'm going to put it right here, right now. So I've basically put together this video and I'm now in a second round of edits that I wasn't exactly planning on. I'm making the edits as I go, and I found some plot holes that I didn't catch on the first read through. So I've papered over those, but it does mean I have written a couple of new scenes, and those scenes need to be like edited afresh again because they're basically first draft, get it down. So I'll have to re-edit those, and then I think I can call it done, hopefully. So instead of taking one pass to do a polishing edit, it's turning out to be 2 passes, and that's okay. I am going to probably read the last third of the manuscript again just to be sure everything's still flowing smoothly, because I've moved a couple scenes around. I have added a couple of new scenes, as I mentioned. And then there's the bit where I read it and I didn't believe it, which happened to me in book 2 and is now happening again in book 3. Yay. I need to see the rewrite that I've done if I now believe it. And if I don't believe it, there will be a cutting of a chapter or 2. And a little bit of rewriting at the end. Thankfully, it doesn't impact the entire novel like happened in book 2. I talked about that a bit in my previous video. So yes, hopefully by the time this video comes out, I will have completed editing and I will be working on the props, printing out the books for me to find in the attic, in the trunk. To find in the trunk from the attic. Okay, back to my outro probably. Thank you for watching. If you want to read books 1 and 2 of the Môrdreigiau Chronicles, they are available now over on Substack at projectstarfish.substack.com. You can subscribe for free, just need your email. There's no cost involved. I plan to keep the whole thing free because this is a fun, playful experience for me, and I do not want it to feel like work at any point in time. Of course, if you're a writer and you need to make money, go for it. But for me, it's free. I make it the best as I can, as you saw with my editing process, covering all the bases, repeated passes through the manuscript. And in fact, if you have a different way of editing, pop a link to your video below telling me all about it, and I'll go check that out because I can always learn something new. As I hope that perhaps you have today in editing your manuscript. I hope I have whetted your appetite a bit for A Sword for Wellington, coming out sometime in June or early July of 2025. And I've asked you to subscribe to Substack if you want to keep seeing videos like this, which I'm going to be doing every couple of weeks. Every week turned out to be too much for someone who wants to write rather than film. You know what to do. There's a subscribe button down there. There's a like button too if you liked this, and comment too. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. And next time, we are going to start working on book 4 together. So this is now going to transform. This is now going to transform into a vlog where we're going to go through book 4 together. So I will talk vaguely and then perhaps somewhat specifically about various plot threads, etc. But really you'll be watching me go through the process of wrapping up a fantasy series. Hopefully it's going to stay at 4 books and not expand to 5. We will see. And you will see, of course, because they're already coming up next. I'm actually itching to get started on book 4, but I have book 3 to wrap up and make and film for first. So one thing at a time. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you here again soon, and I hope your day or evening has been going quite well and continues to do so. Take care. Bye.